Hi guys, it's Charles again. This is another edition of the Burning Desire show. I've got Alice. Is it Lyons? How I pronounce it?
Yeah, that's it.
Alice Lyons with me today. We were supposed to attend a networking dinner the other night. I didn't attend. Did you actually attend that dinner?
No, it was last night. They posted a photo of them all out and about. And I was like, guys, you're going to be riddled.
Yes, yeah. So it was a bit. Yeah. Anyway, so I decided not to because my dad's not so well. He's fine, nothing too major. But that was that. But I looked at your profile and I thought, here's an interesting person, and I find you interesting. Therefore, I'll be selfish now. I'll make a podcast out of it.
Oh, thanks.
That's
As long as
basic.
you're interested, that's fine.
That's basically how this works. If listeners or viewers find it interesting, that's awesome as well. But I make it for myself, honestly. I know it sounds really selfish, but
That's the same
it
reason I
is.
started my podcast originally. So.
Exactly. So I was having a look at your background to start with, I suppose. And so you first thing that I noticed is you did a degree in creative writing. Tell me about that, because I can always find it's funny. I've changed my mindset on this. I used to think degrees that are specifically for vocation are the way to go,
Mhm.
but I think as you get older and reflect upon things, I think the actual university experience itself has a lot of benefits to people, of living alone, living independently rather, and all those sorts of things. But I also think the sort of more flowery subjects, I would say, without trying to, you know, say something incorrect here,
How dare
have
you?
have some real value that I hadn't perceived previously, maybe. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to see what you did, and how that helps you now, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. Personally, I completely disagree about the value of university. I hated it. I hated the entire experience. But largely probably because I stayed on the doorstep, so I lived with my parents and stuff. But
Okay.
all of that aside, it was sort of a panic, just last minute decision for me. I applied through clearing, so very, very last minute. And it was just
Yeah.
based on the premise that, oh, you needed a degree to be anybody.
Got you.
So I panicked. And when I applied, I had no idea what to do because I've always been a bit of an all rounder. So I didn't really know where to focus. So I just ended up doing what I loved and what I cared about and what I thought I could actually stick with for 3 years. So I
Yep.
did. The major was creative writing, and the minor side of the degree was media communications.
Hmm.
Um, and I was just obsessed with. I've always been a writer. I was published when I was like 11,
Wow.
with like a little, short story competition kind of thing. Um,
Amazing.
so I just did what I loved, and I'm obsessed with media studies because I just love how it was really interesting when I was studying media about how these big constructs, these big structures can work on all of our lives without us even realizing it. And it wasn't until I studied media I was like, wow, the news is constructed. It's not necessarily factual. It's someone interpreting facts and presenting it back to you. So I just was really interested on how powerful the media was, and I just wanted to keep studying it really. So yeah, I just studied what I loved, and it's only recently, it's only in the last 2 years when I started doing marketing that I realized, oh, actually, these skills are really relevant, and kind of going into the future with content creation going the way it is and everything, it's
Uh,
more important than ever to be clear about your messaging, to be clear about what you want to say to people, and to be able to position it correctly and do that in a really succinct but also authentic way, I think. So it wasn't relevant when I started it, but it's just become it's come full circle. So it's nice how it works.
yeah, I said this on the last podcast that I did, but it's so relevant, and it's from Steve Jobs' commencement speech at Stanford, and again, if you haven't seen it, or anyone that's listening or watching hasn't seen it, I super urge you to go and look at it on YouTube. And he talks about various things, but one of the main takeaways he says, which is exactly what you're talking about, is you can't connect the dots going forward,
Connecting the
only
dots.
backwards.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And it just shows itself time and time again in everyone's story that, like, you don't really know at the time while you're doing something. You think it's for X reason, and everything's linear and like a graph, but life
Mhm.
isn't like that. It's a higgledy piggledy jagged kind of graph that
It's
you
so
never know where
true.
it's going.
It's so true. And I'm one of those people who I can make decisions really intuitively. So if I get really honest about what I want and what's right for me, I don't need a lot of facts and figures to back it up, because every time I act on that kind of intuitive pull, it always leads to the right answer. So I've learned is as much as anything, it's for time saving reasons. If I feel like I want to do something, or I feel compelled to do something, I will just do it without questioning it.
I think that's also pretty refreshing, because I think there has been, maybe the last kind of few years, I've noticed it a lot, is that people are like, oh, I've got to get all this market research, and I've got to understand, like, in a business sense, for example. So I'm in the startup community, like, you know it's the kind of fail fast, fail often approach.
Yeah.
Albeit you got to take these adages. I always say this within context, right?
Yeah.
And you can go off the scale with them and go, oh, but Richard Branson said fake it till you make it, and like, oh, I became very poor because of that. Like, you've got to be realistic with how you use these things. But absolutely, I think getting an idea out there, starting that podcast, starting that business, starting that creative writing you want to do, without going, oh, but what's the exact segment I need to hit? And like, let's ask 1,000 people. And like, by the time you've asked that, you've got so many conflicting opinions. So everyone's got a different view that actually nothing really gets done. So there is a very much an approach to be, intuitive and to go with your gut. And at the end of the day, that gut feeling comes from all your experiences and emotional experiences from the past. So it's what's really realistically what's right for you. I seem to remember, like, Lord Sugar, going back to my apprentice days, he would once say, oh, what do you mean you're going with your gut sort of thing? But funnily enough, as the years have gone by, you see him making decisions where he'll kind of say, well, like, for example, I should have been in sort of some circles fired in the first week when I was on the show. But he was like, this, I feel like for some reason there might be something there. And that's quite interesting. There's nothing else. He's not got data that shows anything. He's just going, I've looked at his CV, or I haven't, or people have, or whatever. I've looked at his business model. I've looked at who he is, and I think, it's worth a shot. And the person isn't, but
he's definitely been doing that increasingly. I have followed The Apprentice for a few years. It's one of the few programs I will actually, sit down and watch it. And it's been really interesting for me. And one of the things that I've picked up on just from starting my own business recently as well is that there's no one absolute right or wrong way to run a business. There is absolutely no one structure you can follow that will absolutely work for you. And you see it all the time in tasks where the team do everything right and just one little thing will go wrong, or they just miss one customer, something small will happen and the other team just happened to beat them. And it's not that the other team were better. You've seen the whole process, they're not any better and the other team deserved to win, but it just didn't go their way on the day. And you can't predict that. Sometimes it's so unpredictable. And I just think if there's no absolute right and there's no absolute wrong, you may as well just make your own way and do your own version of it, and it'll feel better to you as well. When you're doing stuff that you care about and you're doing it in the way that makes the most sense to you, you just enjoy it and things just flow so much easier. And like, why not? It's the same as one of my favorite phrases is people are going to judge you either way. So if people are going to make their own judgments about you, you may as well do what you want to do and have them judge you for that, because then you'll feel better about saying, well, fuck it works for me and I'm really happy. So it's you just have to do what's right for you.
No, I agree. And now I think I spend a lot. In fact, let's just come to this first, because something you mentioned I thought was quite interesting. So you talked a lot about media constructs and how you weren't necessarily as aware until you studied the media in some depth, how facts, figures, and stories are constructed, to use your phrase, to certain sort of certain narrative. And I think I don't want to go too much into depth with coronavirus. I think everyone's understands it and kind of wants some relief from that. And hopefully this podcast can give a bit of that. But I'm just curious to understand your view on that, because, for example, I was at dinner the other night and one of the BBC headlines was coronavirus doubles, like in the UK. And you're like, oh, wow, that sounds horrendous. But then it's coming off a base of 10 to 20, which is terrible. Like, one death's really bad, don't get me wrong. But I think that's a prime example of where, really, is that headline necessary? Or could they just say it's, coronavirus now at 20? You know what I mean? Is that kind of thing you're talking about? Is that what you're trying to refer to?
Yeah, it's that kind of... it is just being aware that these things are constructed to sell papers and to there are definite aims of the media, and traditionally media and politics have always been really closely intertwined, and that's one of the most interesting things to me. If you look back at the very early days of the press and how they represented political figures, is kind of an antagonistic relationship, and the Guardian was kind of founded, and the Independent and kind of more left-wing papers were founded on the principles that the government were in the wrong and the people need to take back power and stuff. There's always a lot of power dynamics that come into play with the press, because traditionally it's very affluent white people who have, and men as well, who have the power and the money to be able to produce print. And to this day things haven't really moved on all that much, and those old kind of power structures are still very much at play. So it's just being aware of like where these massive industries have come from and what they were created to do. And that I think we're in a really interesting age now with social media and stuff. It is a very much more democratic way of presenting information, because no matter what the mainstream media are saying, we as people have the power to put out our own content. And there's a lot of power that comes with that. There's also a lot of responsibility, I'd argue. And I talk a lot about this in the work that I do. But I say to people, you have a platform, you are able to talk freely. What are you going to do with that? Are you going to do it for the betterment of people, or are you going to do it to detriment people? And we see it all the time with stuff going viral on social media. It can be a really positive thing, and it can get so much goodness out into the world. And it's just a case of using the audiences we have. And we've got the power to be able to do that nowadays, rather than just relying on the press. But yeah, I think it's just important that people still realize that these are companies, they're running for profit, and just do their own sort of due diligence and digging around to find the best information that they can. But it's hard because we all know there's a lot of noise out there. There is a lot of noise.
Yeah, I think also I saw something last night, for example, and I'll give them a shout out. I think it's a restaurant, could be a hotel or a pub. I'm not looked into it, to be honest. But there's certainly a food establishment called the Sheridan in Manchester. And there's a lady, and again, I'm awful name. I think her name is Vanessa. Apologies if I get this wrong. And she posted something on LinkedIn because her establishment have decided that, they've got staff, they've got food, they're going to cook meals for people for free who can pre-order them and pick them up, and for those that can't feed themselves for whatever reason that might be. And I thought that's a brilliant initiative.
Amazing.
I actually found it by another apprentice fellow, Lewis Ellis, give him a shout out, who shared it, and I thought that's brilliant, and I'll share that myself. And I actually looked at this person's post, and one of the posts she said that on Instagram it had X 4,000 views or something. On LinkedIn, no one bothered to share it, like it, or anything. And it's like, it's a bit strange sometimes the way people operate. It's like, why wouldn't you click the share button and just let people see that? I think on LinkedIn, I don't know, but I think that people are very careful what they post on LinkedIn, because they're either an employer, they are an employee, or there's certain relationships that they've got on there, and they're like, God forbid someone, as you were saying, should judge them for the wrong reason, like they posted that and someone looks at it and goes, oh, that's so, not you, or whatever. But I think on the other mediums, like Instagram, for example, I think people are more less worried about because it's more of a closed environment. So I think that might be the reason. But I'd really urge people, particularly this period of time, that if you can share something, it takes 2 seconds, whether it's verbally, whether it's on digital media, whatever, that is going to help people, then why wouldn't you do that? Like, it makes sense to, as you said, use the platforms that we all have to the greatest benefit for all. It makes complete sense.
This is it. I think communally, we do need to just think of take a more collective approach. I think people can be very cagey around social media, and especially on LinkedIn, because of the way the algorithm works. And you're right, the affiliation with certain companies and stuff, people feel a bit reticent to put their actual opinions out there sometimes, because they have this opinion like, I need to be professional, I need to look a particular way and stuff. And to be honest, like, a lot of the stuff I'm doing, because I do freelance marketing consultancy as well, specifically around like content marketing and personal branding and things. And one of the things I say to people is that this is kind of, in a similar way to what I was saying about the media, this is kind of a bullshit construction we have about professionalism and hustle culture and all these things. These are all stories that we're being told, and we're just perpetuating it by kind of confining ourselves to these very rigid structures and behavioral patterns. And if actually enough of us turn around and say, you know what, I'm a person in business, but I'm also just a fucking person. And this is what I care about. This is what I believe in. I believe in helping the next person along. I'd like other people to do the same. And you get these little like ripple effects happening when one person is a bit more human and actually bring their personality to work. It has a massive impact. And that's why I do the wellbeing work I do and the sort of training I do around mental health. I say, look, it just comes down to being who you actually are. And the more you bring yourself to work, the more you give permission to the next person to do the same thing. And it has this positive impact. And I'm a massive advocate of LinkedIn. I absolutely love the platform. And I think it can be a real force for good. I've seen so much, I don't know, it sounds like almost the opposite of your experience. I've seen a lot of great information being relayed on there recently, and people really sort of coming together. But it has to start with somebody, and it has to start with people saying, actually, this is more important than my business. This message is worth sharing, and I want to make people, it comes from the right intent. If people have the right intent, and again, it's about being true to who you are. If you have the right intention behind what you're posting, it will resonate with people because they know you're being genuine and they know you care. And actually, if I put my marketing hat on, in terms of like your brand and how you come across to customers and clients and stuff, this is going to be a really interesting time with the coronavirus, because the situation is going to make real villains of some people. And actually, it will make heroes of others, because
Yeah.
the brands that genuinely care about their customers and they genuinely care about the collective and social good and all these things, those brands will thrive off the back of this because of things they're doing. Pret a Manger is a great example. So yesterday they put a press release out saying, we love the NHS, all your hot drinks are on us for the foreseeable, and we'll take 50% off everything else. Just come in and show us your badge. And that thing is spreading like wildfire now, because
Wow. I didn't hear about that. It's really interesting.
it's such a strong statement that they've made. I think it only came out yesterday, but it's absolutely blown up even on LinkedIn. And it's brands like that, people will just have that emotional connection to them because they know it's not just about the bottom line for them anymore. They're doing the right thing for the right reasons. And people care about that as well they should, because we are just people at the end of the day. It's all very well to dress up in our fancy suits and say, oh my God, I got a multi-million-dollar company, but take that all away in a crisis situation, and what are you left with? You're left with someone with a lot of money, a lot of resources, and a lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
And what are they going to do with those choices that they have to make?
Very true, very true. So you went then from creative writing, you then went into business. What business kind of degree, Open University? What was the rationale there? Was it, I need to now, tailor this to something more that I can make into a job? Was that as simple as it was, or was it not that simple?
Yeah, there's always an existential crisis going on in the background, no doubt. But it was more the fact that I hated my job, to be honest. I came out of uni. I couldn't get a degree. What's the thing called? When you get a placement after uni.
Yeah.
I couldn't get one of those, even though I was always like a high achiever. So I just kind of assumed, I'm going to walk into one of those placement thingies. Didn't happen. Ended up sweeping up cigarette butts at my local Costa. And I was like, what does it all mean? This is so pointless. And I worked my way up, and I started showing an interest in the business and showing an interest in the figures and stuff. And I was like, business is kind of, as a concept, is quite interesting. And it was around that time I started watching The Apprentice, actually, because I was like, I'll try and figure out this business thing. I did it on the side. Just I used to take my coursework in and sit in the back room and like tidy a little space to do my homework while I was cleaning the pots and stuff. And it helped me accelerate through the ranks and get into management at the hospitality chain. So I learned not just the bricks and mortar of how to run a business on the ground. I learned about the behind the scenes and the structures and all the things behind it as well. So yeah, it was really interesting. I loved it. I loved learning about the accounts and the numbers. And
so would you say, is it fair to say that you, and I think a lot of people have this, where I think I'm maybe in the category too, where you're a high achiever at school academically, and you're told, as you say, that you get a degree and then you get a well-paid job, and then you just rise through the ranks, and that's how life works. Then you have kids, and then you have, what I mean? It's all like very set in stone, the kind of different things. And would you say that experience with Costa kind of brought you back to the reality almost of how things actually work, and that if I want my situation to change, I got to do something about it? Like what inside of you, I'm always interested in this kind of thing, what inside of you said to yourself, right, if I want to be a manager here, if I want to rise up the ranks, whatever you want to call it, I need to go study? What was that said that to you? Was someone said something to you, or you just internally went, I need some more qualifications or knowledge to be able to exist in this environment?
Yeah, do you know what, I've always been quite a curious person, and I do like learning about different things. And I learned a lot at Costa just through like going through the barista process and talking to different people and stuff. And I was sort of climbing that way anyway, but I think it was just it was a very humbling experience when you sort of it was like sweeping up cigarette butts outside, and I would always be like, what am I doing? This is ridiculous. And I felt like I was stuck a little bit. I felt a little bit stuck, and that for me is like, that is kryptonite to me. I cannot feel trapped in what I'm doing. Like, freedom is one of my highest values. So as soon as I started to feel like I was stagnating, I was like, I need to be doing something else. I need to be stimulating my mind as much as anything. So it was more trying to crawl away from a difficult place rather than like aiming towards something. And it's not, and people underestimate the power of being in a difficult situation, because that can be a massively motivating factor. And for me, because I felt so stuck and I felt so like agitated, I needed to be doing something. So it wasn't, nobody told me like, you need to go and study media. business at all, because I was already
Yeah.
progressing through the ranks a little bit. But it was just, I was just feeding my curiosity. Again, it was just one of those little nudges of like, oh, this sounds interesting. I can do it in my own time. But my manager saw me on my lunch break doing all the studying, and he fast tracked me through the management process and sent me on
Amazing
training and stuff. So, you know, people pay attention to what you're doing. If you show an interest, it's just one of these things. When you start following what you're actually interested in, the right people will just appear to support you, and you'll have more interesting conversations. And through conversations, someone will say, oh, I think I could put you in touch with someone who does that kind of thing. You know, like doors start to open when you take the action first. Other people come along to help you. It's amazing how it happens.
I don't want to sound this want this to sound wrong, so I don't know how to put this right.
Really, go on.
but I think it's maybe part from talking to you only for say 20 minutes. I think I'm getting the impression that you probably, like me, looking at your employment history as well, is not so consistent to mine, where you do something and then you realise, this isn't really the route I want to go down. You take another turn and you go, you know, and you've done that quite a number of times. Which some people would look at that and go, oh, this is clearly someone who doesn't know what they want to do and da. I look at it, it says that actually there's someone that's really trying to find what it is they're super interested in, and like it's someone that's determined to, like, it doesn't matter how it looks to anyone else, because as I say, a lot of people look at CVs and go, oh, we need to have 3-4 years at one company, and then all that sort of stuff. Is that true, or is that not true?
No, absolutely right. And I definitely agree with you, because I've hired a lot in the past, and I look at people's CVs and I always take a kind of critical approach to it. And for me, I know I've got an internal bias where I'm more critical of people that stay in the same company. They say, I have 15 years experience in this company. I was like, is that 15 really good varied years, or is it the same year which you've replicated 15 times?
Interesting.
Like, it's not necessarily a wealth of experience, it's the same experience multiple times.
It's a very good way of looking at it, actually, you know.
Yeah, like I'm really critical of those people, and they need to really justify their experience to me. But yeah, for me, I just know what makes me tick, and like I'm curious and I move quickly, and if things bore me, I want to change, and I'm good at changing things as well. Like I've moved up through the ranks in a couple of companies because I just want to be learning, I want to be doing the next thing. So in the places where I've had the opportunity to do that, it was really good for me to explore different skill sets and learn how to be a leader and all these things. But yeah, I'm not one for sticking in a bad situation. If I can see that a situation cannot change for the better and I can't influence it, and there are limitations, you have to make a decision of whether you're just going to keep hitting your head against a brick wall or whether you change. And one of the companies I was with was a hotel chain, and I just felt like that was the situation. It was the longest 6 months of my life. It was really, really hard work, and I loved it for a really long time. But as soon as I fell out of love with it, I could really look at it from the outside.
I've had that many times.
Oh yeah, it's like an abusive relationship when you're in the wrong job sometimes.
No, it's true.
You think, what am I actually doing? Where is the benefit? And it's not good for you. It's not good for the company to have you hanging around, you know, with a bad 100%. Feeling around you. It doesn't benefit anyone. So I'm all for, I am a massive believer in personal autonomy and like the power we all have. And that I think people kind of downplay how much power they have in their lives and how much influence they have in their roles. So it's not always a case that you have to cut and run. And I wouldn't encourage people to just jack in a job just for the sake of it. I would say try and influence change wherever you can. So if you can change the role for the better, if you can change the business for the better, fucking do it if you want to. And I would always say that people try that as the first point of call. And sometimes you don't even realize how much you can change just by saying to a manager, you know, I've noticed this. I think it could be better if we did this. Let's give it a go, because that's less disruption for everybody. And actually, that's how collaboration happens. It's when everybody has some input and some stake in the business as well. So yeah, I've kind of taken that approach of trying to make positive change. If it doesn't work, of course, walk away. There's no harm in walking away from things that don't serve you.
So, and I'm also super interested. You've also within your kind of remit, you've done some interior design as well, which is just another like interesting thing. That's super interesting. And then I'm really interested in kind of the meat of this, where you've now working, or you've had some kind of mental health troubles in the past. We all have to varying degrees. Can you tell me a bit about how that's come about, when it started, triggers, that sort of stuff, and how you then turned that into kind of helping others? Is really interesting to me.
Yeah, so my mental health problems started when I was in my late teens. So my teenage years were absolutely fine, but it was going into college and uni and going through these kind of existential crises, crossroad points where you have to start making big decisions. I found it really traumatizing. So I had a lot of depression throughout my early 20s specifically, and it led to suicide ideation as well. So I was having suicidal thoughts. They never got to the point of acting on it, which is
Yeah,
one of the things I raise awareness around a lot, is the fact that you can have suicidal thoughts without ever intending to take your life.
sure, sure.
But that was recurring throughout my 20s. I say there was a good like 10, 11-year period. And I still struggle with these things, you know, to this day. It's still something that recurs and I have to mitigate. But yeah, it was really bad when I was, I had sort of a physical breakdown when I was in Costa, actually. I had to have some time off. And it was during the time that I had this physical, I had an operation, and during the recovery, my mental health just took a massive nosedive. I was super depressed, and I just sort of had that clarity moment of looking at my life and going, I'm really not happy with anything here. I want to change everything at the same time. I started watching TED Talks on YouTube. And it was just hearing from these people who are at the top of their game. Like, I've always aspired to be one of those people who just knows who the fuck they are. And I just went through the longest time of not knowing anything about myself. And all of these TED speakers, all these people who are like at the top of their game, the top of their fields, they'd all had a really similar journey to me of like, they're going on this trajectory, rock bottom point, and then everything's happened for the better off the back of it.
Yeah.
And I just found that really inspiring. And you see it again and again, like name any entrepreneur that you look up to, and they've probably all gone through a very similar trajectory, which is really interesting.
I think it's so interesting though that you have the ability that I think you probably don't give yourself enough credit for, just from my observation, of being able to take yourself from a dark place, whether it be you're not happy at work or not happy internally or whatever that might be, and look for answers. I think a lot of people don't see that step. They kind of just are in that place, and you're going to be in that place for some time. And I've been in similar places in a certain period of time, and it's really hard, and it's a downward spiral because you don't want to speak to people because you're not doing well that much. You get anxious about what you're going to talk about. That was my personal thing.
Yeah.
So you stop going out as much, stop seeing people as much, and like then you're just not engaging. Your brain's not engaged. Blah blah. But I'm super interested to how you then, each time it seems that, you know, whether it's Costa Coffee, whether it's something's not right for you, you don't just throw the towel in. You then go, hold on a minute, right? Like, who can I look to? What can I do to enhance my position? I think that's a really strong message, but I'm interested as to how you came about that. Is it just an intelligence thing? Is it just after a period of time of a lull, you naturally look for that? Is that just a natural curiosity you were saying? Is that what you think that is?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Yeah, it's something I probably do just overlook it, because it is just certain things are just inbuilt in your character, I think. Like, we have a personality type, and my personality type is such that I get bored really fucking easily, and I'm interested.
I hope you're okay with this conversation, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I just love finding out about different things, and the world is such a big place, and there's so many interesting avenues to explore. Because I've always been one of those sort of what do they call them, like a modern Renaissance person, like I'm not a specialist, I'm a generalist. Like, I'm interested in everything, and maybe like some intelligence.
Polymath, maybe.
Polymath, yes, I love that word. Yeah. I love that. Like, multi-creative is another one. All these different terms are coming out now. Because historically, it used to be like, you need to have one job. That's your vocation. You do it for the rest of your life. And I've never gelled with that at all.
Yeah.
I think I've got a little bit of sort of ADHD or something as well. Like, I need to be active. I need to be stimulated. There's just so many like drivers within me that make me do these things. So I've never really questioned it too much. It's just a case of like, if I have the resources and I'm able to do something, I'll do it straight away. If I don't have the resources, I'll do something to get me closer to the resources to be able to do the thing. It's just, I don't know, there's probably a lot to be said for my upbringing as well, and just having parents that said, you know, whatever you want to do, we'll support you to a certain extent. Like, not always, which is frustrating, but I've always there are certain privileges that come from being in the UK and having the internet and all these kind of things. Like, I don't know, it must just be an innate thing. But the more I've noticed, it's a kind of proof is in the concept, really. The more I've gone after things that I'm interested in, the more things do work out. So it's kind of like I've gained confidence through seeing how things work out, and I'm very reflective as well. So I journal a lot.
Very good.
and just when I've journaled and kind of kept track of things, and I kind of tell stories back to myself of like, oh, do you remember that time when that thing happened and then it led to that, and then that thing was really good. So that reflection process helps you spot patterns in your behavior and stuff as well.
It's actually super interesting. So in terms of that, I was listening to oh man, his name's escaping me now. Tim Ferriss, that's the one.
Oh
Tim
yeah.
Ferriss podcast, and he had Penn Jillette, who's the guy from Penn and Teller, the magicians. If you know them, you do.
Yeah.
And one thing he was saying that he always like asked like a little life hack, for want of a better phrase. I kind of hate that word, but whatever. And Penn was like, well, I journal every day, and I've done it for like 25 years, and I've like probably missed 3 days maximum in that period of time. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy. And I'm like, I hadn't even thought of doing that like at all. So then I downloaded an app called Day One, which is a free app to use. And it's on my laptop, and every day, I haven't done this morning, so we'll do after this. I'll just kind of log the day before.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like a sentence, honestly. Sometimes it's like a paragraph. It could be longer, whatever. And it is actually really interesting to them when you've built a bit of an archive to then go, Penn then goes like back 1 year, 5 years, 10 and 20, because you've got that, obviously, that depth of thing to look into. Where when you first start, you might only have 1 week or a month or whatever. So I kind of waited till I've done it for a month and a half or so. So now I'm looking back at kind of roughly a month ago, and it's super interesting. Like things that were really frustrating to me then, for example, in my world a few months ago, I was trying to find a developer to make Allergy, the app. And it was so frustrating, and every day, like I was writing about how annoying it is. And now I just take it for granted that I've got a guy working on it and it's going to be done in 2 days.
Yeah.
Like, you look back and you're like, wow, like that thing I was so frustrated by, like a month later, it's not even relevant. Like, it's so interesting.
The main thing that it gives you is perspective. It really does. And you'll be fascinated, because I've been keeping a journal since, don't even know, I was probably about 15 or 17. I've got two suitcases next to my bed that are full of journals.
Suitcases?
Yeah.
Wow.
Honest to God. Because a lot of them I filled out during my degree as well, because don't forget I was doing creative writing. So I got into a writing practice where like every day was like pages and pages. And it was just, you didn't have to be in the mood to write. You just had to write. That was the only fucking rule. You just write your ass off. And actually another sort of extension of the life hack, if you're interested, is it's really good to do morning pages. So one of the first things to do in the morning is just get, like I used to do it with my degree, 4 pages, 4 A4 pages, just write. Even if all that comes to mind is, I don't know what to write, just keep going and let your hand do the work. And after a while, what happens is your conscious mind is focusing on just keeping your hand moving. So while it's doing that, your unconscious mind is able to come forward, and you'll come up with some of the most weird and wonderful thoughts from your brain. It might not make any sense, and it might all sound like waffle, and sometimes you'll start like telling stories for no reason, or some people just use it for stress relief, and they just get, if they wake up and they're anxious about something, they write it all down. It just gets it out of their head and into the real world. And when things are out of your head, they feel so much more manageable. And then you can start to kind of workshop it and think it through logically. But it's a really interesting state, the first hour when you're out of bed, like in that kind of in-between stage between being asleep and being awake. It's when your brain is really lucid and really creative. So if you get into the habit of writing things down in the morning, it's amazing what can come up. People find it very therapeutic. And it's a like morning pages as a phrase is in a book that's called I'm reading it at the moment, actually. It's called The Artist's Way. And the author, whose name I've just forgotten, recommends 2 things. She recommends morning pages and artist dates. So once a week, you take yourself out for something that's nothing to do with your work. It's just purely a creative exercise. So you could go to a gallery, or you could go for a long walk and just have some thinking time and stuff. But she said by combining those 2 things, it brings so much more creativity to your life. And she makes the argument, as do a lot of people actually, that we are all creative in some way.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I agree too. And it's just that in our society, like we were saying earlier about constructs and stuff, like off of the back of the Industrial Revolution, we live in a very industrialized world and a very mechanized, functional, left-brained kind of world of like organization and stuff. And actually, if you let the other side of your brain come out and emerge, it is like a truer expression of who you are, because it's like both sides of your brain are activated rather than just one side, and you're not repressing any part of your personality. So working some kind of creativity into your daily routine is actually really good for your mental health and well-being. And it seems to hold true for most people, even if you don't enjoy journaling. But I'd say, like you said, if you write down a line at the end of the day to say, this is what I did today. And then in the morning, if you do like, this is what I intend to do today, or here are 3 things I'm grateful for. it's really beautiful to look back on all those things and see how far you've come in just these tiny incremental steps, which otherwise you would have forgotten about by next week. But if you write it down, it's like, fuck, I've achieved a lot in the course of a month. It's amazing.
I think in terms of construct and creativity, one of the things, there's another great TED talk. I don't know can't remember who it's by, but you can find it. It's like one of the most watched, viewed ones, whatever, on creativity. And the guy's talking about the school system, etc.
Yeah.
And like, so for me, like, if you look at me in school, like, I can't draw for toffee. I can't, like, all those sorts of things. Like, in fact, there was something I found in the day, some piece of pottery. Is it here? I think it's here. It's actually quite nice. No, it's not. But anyway, it was somewhere. And but anyway, that was like the best thing I did creative wise. But I think that's because we've created this, to use the word, we've created this environment where creativity is just painting. It's literally that kind of stuff. Whereas for me, I'm creative every day in business. Like, I have to create. I haven't got huge amounts of resource, but I need to get a lot of reach. What do I need to create in terms of? It might be a social media post. It might be like the website I've got to design, because I'm doing almost everything myself. And you start to go like, necessity is the mother of all invention. It absolutely is. If you have to get something done, you will find a way to get that thing done. If you care passionately enough and you've got that kind of burning ambition inside of you, you'll find it. I think you're kind of on that as well. How can people find you, connect with you, and kind of this thing called Dark Coffee? What is that?
This little old thing I've been working on. So that's the name of my podcast, Dark Coffee.
Oh, okay.
It's also the name of my company. So I've been running the company for nearly a year now. Cool. So that's, so we have unfiltered conversations around mental health in whatever guise that takes. So sometimes it's giving motivational talks, other times we're running workshops, other times I'm just putting content out in terms of like the podcast or video posts, and I'm just like sharing information with people. And it's all to the effect of what we've been talking about today, really. I just help people be unapologetically themselves, and I try and encourage them as much as I can, whether it's getting more confident about their message and how to position it and shouting louder, or whether it's a case of just bringing more of their authentic selves to their work. That's Dark Coffee. So you can download the podcast anywhere. And then LinkedIn is a really good place to find me, because that's where I spend most of my day, and that's the most easily contactable place. Otherwise, my website is darkcoffee.co.uk, and I'm putting more video content out there now. There's a YouTube channel that's just started, all the good stuff, but LinkedIn, I'd say, is the best place to find me.
Brilliant. I think that's a really nice place to leave it, and it's been like thoroughly enjoyable conversation. So hope you've enjoyed it, and I didn't bore you too much.
No, not at all. You're a great host. Thank you so much.
Super. Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for listening. Subscribe, like, share, etc. That'd be great. Or just watch it yourself. I don't really mind. Just enjoy. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.